Welcome to the Photography Minimalist. In this video we're going to be talking about the Zeiss Ikon Contaflex model number 4, a camera that was built like a tank back in 1956. Before I get out and shoot some photos with this camera, let's have a detailed look at this interesting camera. Let's have a closer look at the Zeiss Ikon Contaflex model number 4, which weighs in at 817 grams. The first thing that comes to mind when you pick up a Contaflex is the weight and also the build quality. It has a very good build quality. It's a very nice camera to hold and a very nice camera to use. Let's start with the top plate of the camera. On the right hand side on top we see this film advance knob, which you turn clockwise. In this knob we have the film exposure counter, which you can adjust to 0 after you put in your film. We have an accessory cold shoe, which can easily be taken off the camera. Let me quickly show you. That came as an accessory. There we are, now it's off. On the left hand side, top side, we see a dial which corresponds to the light meter, which I'll explain a little bit later. We have a film rewind knob, and on the inside ring you can adjust the ISO or the DIN of the film of your choice. A view of the front of the camera, the right top hand side for you as a viewer. If I push this button, then the internal light meter is exposed. We see here two knobs on the focusing ring to help you focus on your subject. On the front, of course, we see the lens, which is a 50mm 2.8 Tessar lens. And by pressing this button underneath the lens, we can actually, by counterclockwise turning the lens, take the lens off the camera. 4 lenses are available for this camera: 35mm wide angle, 50mm, 85mm, and a 115mm. On the side of the lens we have an M and an X for the flash, and we have a V. If you press down this button all the way to the V, then we have a self timer which exposes a photo after 8 seconds. Also, of course, a connection for the external flash. The internal light meter can easily be disabled by closing the cover. When we look at the top of the lens, we see a depth of field scale, an aperture scale, and a shutter speed scale. And when we look at the right hand of the camera, actually for you as a viewer it's the left hand of the camera, of the lens, we see a scale of red numbers. These numbers correspond to the light meter on top here, left. Let's have a closer look at the left top dial and the metering system incorporated in this camera. First thing you need to do is adjust the ISO setting. So for example, I was using a 400 ISO film. At the moment the ISO setting is at 80. So I lift up this knob to give me easy access to the inside dial, and I turn the dial to 400 ISO, which in this case is just above the 320 level, about here. Push the knob back again. Now for the light metering system. It opens very easily, and you'll immediately see that the light meter will move. And now it's only a matter of turning this dial until you exactly match the white line of the light meter, and then you go to this red triangle which exactly corresponds to 13. Now we go to the lens and we change the level to 13, which I've done now. Sorry, it was on 12 and now I can change it to 13. When I change it to 13, I have all the corresponding shutter speeds and apertures that give a correct exposure as it has been metered. So I can go from 1/15th of a second f/22 all the way up to 1/500th of a second f4 with a 400 ISO film to get a correct exposure. That's all there's to it. It is very, very easy. And if the exposure gets way too low, then you see here on the dial that we don't have the red numbers corresponding. We have a 2, 4, or 8, that is a half, a quarter, or an eighth of a second exposure value, which can also easily be adjusted because these two rings also work separately from each other if that is necessary. So it's very easy to change the shutter speed without changing the aperture dial. But when using it with the internal meter, it always has a set of shutter speeds and apertures that correspond with each other to give a correct exposure. An interesting thing to point out is when you exchange the lens, the aperture and the shutter are incorporated in this lens mount within the body and not within the lens itself, as you see here. And it is very easy to click the lens back into place. Maybe one more interesting thing, and that's the underside of the camera. We have here a button for the film rewind, and we have two knobs which we can lift and turn to open the camera, as you can see here, to load or unload the film. So that's an overview of the Zeiss Ikon Contaflex Model 4. Today I'm going to be photographing with the Carl Zeiss Contaflex, and today is the 1st of April, so we're still under Corona restrictions here in the Netherlands. So I've chosen a very quiet place to have a walk around and take some pictures. Now this is a location I used previously when I made the video on the Flexaret, so maybe you see some similar photos coming by, but that's just how it is at the moment. I wanted to stay nearby home and not travel too far because of all these restrictions going on. So let's get started. I put in a roll of Ilford HP5 Plus, and the intention is to see how sharp this lens is. I'm only going to be using its internal light meter, and I've chosen today because it's an overcast day. Tomorrow it's going to be much brighter, and I think this overcast day will suit the light meter in the Contaflex much better. So let's get going. 1/500th is the fastest shutter speed, f/22 is the smallest aperture, and I want to stay away from f/22. I thought f/16 would be fine, so it can just match up to the ISO 400 with these lighting conditions at the moment. Well, I thought I found a quiet location, and initially it was quiet and I was able to take maybe 5 or 6 photos, but very quickly it became too busy, and especially with the coronavirus situation I don't feel very comfortable with many people around me. So I left that location, went to another location which was also too busy, so that ended quite early today. Tomorrow I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to step into the car and drive to different locations and only get out of the car to take the photo, jump back in the car and go to a next location. Hopefully that will also give some more variety in the photos that I'm going to be taking with this Zeiss Ikon. So the story continues tomorrow again. So what is my first impression after shooting a roll of Ilford HP5 Plus through this Zeiss Ikon Contaflex? Well, first of all, it is indeed a very good build quality, but it is also a very heavy camera to use. The interesting thing is that it has interchangeable lenses. There are a total of 4 lenses available for this camera, ranging from a wide-angle 35mm to the standard 50mm 2.8 Tessar lens, through to an 85 and 115mm telelens. I have seen the 35, the 50 and the 115. I haven't been able to find the 85mm yet. All in all, the lenses have a very good image quality, sharp images and a reasonably high contrast. What is also interesting about this camera is that it has a built-in light meter, which is very consistent and very accurate. My impression is, however, that the meter does underexpose by about 1 stop, so that's something that you would need to take into account. What is also very interesting with regards to this camera is the fact that it has a split screen focusing, one of my favorites. A limiting factor could be that it has a top shutter speed of 1/500th of a second, meaning that if you are in bright conditions outside like I was, and you have a reasonably high ISO 400 film in your camera, then it will just be enough. Meaning that you're going to be photographing continuously at maybe f16 or f22. So in bright conditions I would go for an ISO 100 film and then you will be fine. Last thing that I would like to mention that is very interesting is that you can flash sync at all shutter speeds, all the way up to 1/500th of a second. So all in all, it is a very interesting camera, and it could be had, including its standard lens, for about $60 or $70 for a working camera, which is not bad. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them forward, and don't hesitate, of course, to subscribe to my channel and keep up to date with all the new videos. And if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.